Hello, hi, my name is Calyx, and today I thought I would jump into the tarot conversation after watching Simon's video with the hashtag Tarot Journey Through Decks. It seemed like a good way to get started. I've been watching tarot too, but this is the first time I've joined the conversation. So I thought I would say a little bit about how I got started and why, even though I bought my first deck in 1982, and I've studied tarot for a very long time, I'm still actually a rank beginner in terms of actually practicing with it. So I'll clear some of this away. This is kind of my spread here, and the way it's set up, and if I get it wrong, please excuse me. I've been watching, but maybe there are rules that I haven't understood. So about tagging and tarot things. The first deck I got was in the summer of 1982, and it's called The Stairs of Tarot by Tavaglione. I don't know that that's actually his name. Maybe it's Tavaglione, or I went to a school where we had a building. It looked like it was Taliaferro, but it was actually Tolliver. So however you say his name, if someone knows, they can tell me. But it came with this, this was all it was. This box and this little book, which has, is that clear? It's got a lot on there, and it's a little hard to jump into and understand, particularly if you don't really know what tarot is, but you're a teenager and you've wandered into a metaphysical shop for your first time and you're on vacation in California, thousands of miles away from where you grew up, and you're spending all of your money that you have for your whole vacation on this one deck because it looks magical and looks like it has, secret symbols and stuff on it. I have always been interested in codes and languages, and I was actually studying Italian at the time and saving up because I really wanted to go to Italy. And so I saw this, and the words, the bottom were in Italian, and I thought, oh, this is how perfect this is, magical. And I bought it thinking that the person I bought it from, the guy running the shop, had said that it had, a detailed instruction booklet in it. And I thought, okay, great. And when I opened this up, this wasn't really enough context or detail for me, or maybe it was too much, but I really didn't. I'd never heard of the Kabbalah. I didn't know anything about Sanskrit. I didn't know about the major and minor arcana. So it was a little overwhelming. So I went back, or I tried to go back the next day. I don't know what I thought I was going to use for money to buy a book, but I thought maybe I could ask some questions. And I could not find the metaphysical shop for anything. I went to where I really was sure it was, and it wasn't there. And I was walking. I mean, I was that young, a teenager. So I just kept my little deck and I went through the cards, and I liked some of them, the moon, and I wasn't really sure about the naked people or the people rising from their graves, but I thought it was interesting, and I liked the queens or empresses and that kind of thing. I really loved the Hermit card. So I didn't read tarot. I didn't even really study it. I just kept this as my magic cards, and that's really all I did with them for another couple of years. And then in about 4 years later, when I was in the Navy and I was on my own and I was making my own money instead of just having to save up my holiday money, I was back in California, and I found another metaphysical shop. This time I made sure to pay attention to exactly what street it was on. I wrote the name down. And I went in and I was determined to buy myself a book or maybe more information on these cards. I didn't have these cards with me because I was in the Navy, and these were somewhere at home packed up with all of my childhood things, but I still remembered them, and I thought, oh, I'll get one. And I walked in, and I'm not going to show you this deck because I do not have it anymore, though I had it for a long time, but I bought a Thoth deck. Now, I've heard people say Thoth, but when I got this one, they were very insistent that I say Thoth. So Thoth, however it's truly said, I don't know. And then I found out there were all these rules. Like, you weren't supposed to have bought a deck for yourself. You were supposed to be given it. Well, I didn't know that. The guy at the shop, when I bought this one, just let me buy it. But so they, even though they had a Thoth deck, and they actually had a book, and the book looked really interesting, they wouldn't sell it to me, which I thought was kind of interesting, but they had a class. You could join a study group, and you could pay for the study group and get assigned a mentor. And then part of that was you would be gifted the materials. And then there was this talk about initiation and stuff, and I wasn't really paying close enough attention to that. And so I was like, absolutely sure, sign me up, you know, except for the fact that my time is not really my own, so I have to kind of work around my schedule. And so did this, got the book, got the materials, showed up for class, got paired with a mentor, and here I am, this, you know, teenage girl, young teenager, but teenager nonetheless. And this older guy, maybe 29, something like that, mid-20s, paired up with me. And I kind of looked around the study group, and there were two or three young guys, but more girls, and the girls were always paired with an older guy. I don't know, the whole thing got just, I don't actually remember a whole lot about it. It got a little creepy, and especially when they started talking about how you weren't allowed to question and you just had to do it, and that there would be things that would make you uncomfortable. And then they were, you know, showing some of the cards then, and I'd already kind of taken my deck home and looked at it, and some of those Aleister Crowley cards are super creepy. And the whole thing just made me, yeah. So I actually just never went back. And I never opened that deck of cards again. The whole thing just felt icky sticky. So cards were kind of off my radar for a while, but I did still get really confirmed in the fact that I wanted to practice magic, and that really wasn't a way for me. So I think I learned something important there. And then about 10 years later, in the summer of 1995, actually, so I have a little bit out of order. In 1995, my mother's a psychotherapist, and she bought herself the Mythic Tarot, and we were talking about this. My grandfather was a mythology professor, and so the Greek myths, I didn't actually grow up with a Bible. I mean, we had one in the house, but it was like with all the other mythology books, like with the Norse mythology, the Celtic mythology, the Greek mythology. So I actually knew more Greek mythology than I did Christian mythology, as my grandfather called it. Although I was raised in the South, so that wasn't a super popular way to grow up. And there's some more of the, you know, visiting churches with friends, and I have some good stories and some funny stories. But that to say, I never had any of that anti stuff with the tarot that some people really get when they have a lot of exposure to conservative Christians here in the West, but particularly in the States, and particularly in the South, I think, or even, like, I never had any of that. My mother I really think she's a contemplative. She's a really interesting person. She's a psychotherapist. And so she got, anyway, back to this workbook, she got the Mythic Tarot, and she was showing it to me. And then I found this Mythic Tarot workbook in the, I don't know, Books A Million or Barnes & Noble, one of those big stores. And I thought, oh, that's the deck that Mother was talking about. So I got the book. I didn't have the deck. And I just started, I thought, well, what I wanted to do was learn about it. So now I can learn about it. I didn't know it could come in the form of Greek mythology. So I started, I colored, and I did this is in March of 95. And I started really studying. I didn't color all of them, but I started studying, and I think it's kind of funny. Like, I have Lisa Frank stickers. That's a sign of the times. I love stickers. Anyway, so I gave myself stickers in my other journal anytime I completed an entry. And then at one point, I lost this book, but I came back to it like 2 years later, maybe 1997, I have written down. And what I did, I think I wrote it down at the beginning of this. Yeah, November of 97. So I had just bought myself this Palladini deck. So I decided that if they had these mythical cards, and then when I was, again, probably at Books A Million or one of those, and I saw another deck, and these were so pretty. This new Palladini deck. I didn't know anything about the Aquarius. I knew nothing, but these, particularly my favorite color is purple. I just thought these were gorgeous. So I bought these cards, and I used this book to study with. So I have a little P for Palladini, and I just wrote notes. I mean, I studied. Now, what I did not do, I mean, I wrote notes and notes, like all the way, even it was in the back here, I was a little bit scattered. I kind of got to them when I would draw a card and come across it. What I didn't do, though, for all my studying, was I didn't actually practice tarot. My mother actually so that was like 95, 97. I was doing all this studying. And then I didn't touch it again. I didn't do any spreads. I didn't lay things out. I just studied the cards, these little pieces of art. And I'll show you some of these ones in this new Palladini deck. It also came with a little white book, but now I knew that there was something else. I'll get this out of the way. I don't love the Hierophant. I'm not really a fan of white guys being the teachers this age anymore, but still, for a traditional Hierophant, I think he's pretty great. And I just thought these were so beautiful. And I really didn't know very much about the Rider-Waite-Smith system, except what was referenced in my Mythic workbook. And they did talk about that, and they talked about traditional tarot a lot, which, since I didn't know the tradition, but I was pretty comfortable with not knowing the tradition. I mean, I grew up sort of outside the tradition that was surrounding me. So aren't these pretty? I love them. And, this was so traditional. Even I, at the time, recognized this as just the classic picture. I was a little worried about all this binding and piercing with the suits. I didn't really know what all of them meant, but I thought they were lovely. Oh, and I've always loved the Strength card. Isn't that just gorgeous? Anyway, so this was my, the first one. This is my beginning. And then I will say that the Milestone was really the Thoth deck, because it completely, like a rock in the road, it just knocked me off the road. But this deck, the new Palladini, this was the Deepening, along with my Mythic tarot workbook. It brought me back, it invited me into the cards, and it pleased my little nerdy self that wanted to see things through that Mythic archetypal lens, which I think is not a bad way to come into it, right? To already be programmed to see it in that way. I've never read for anybody else, and actually at this time in the 90s, I still hadn't read for myself. I just studied. I'm just one of those fixing to get ready to get started kind of people. So I studied a lot before I did anything. Also, I didn't have that much free time. I mean, just a little point. I had a lot of children. Like, my children were born in 1990, 1992, 94, 95, and 98. So all of this was kind of happening in between all of that, and there just wasn't a lot of time. But by 2017, I had a lot more time. My kids were older, things were going well, and I was able to kind of come back and find some pieces of my practice and my spiritual practice, which is it's sort of my own thing, my own path. My friends kind of tease and call me an Episcopagan. I'm just a between the worlds kind of gal, and both. But anyway, I was doing all of that. That was very experiential. But when it came to cards, it wasn't experiential. It was all just cerebral and kind of artistic. So in 2017, though, that changed. I took an art witch class with Effie Wild, and she, for her group, was working with the Wild Unknown Tarot. And this deck just blew my mind. It was beautiful and simplistic, and it invited me in a way. It just made me dig out my cards again. I dug out my workbook. My mother at that time, she wasn't doing the cards anymore. And when I started talking to her, she just gave me her Mythic tarot set. So I actually have her set. So now I have the cards that go with the book, and it came with a cloth. You know, it was one of those all-in-ones. Oops, I just knocked my camera. Hope we're back. Okay. It came with a cloth that you could spread out upside down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think this is a Celtic cross. I don't know, but it was kind of fun to lay the cards out on it, and they matched whether I was using the Mythic Tarot or whether I was using Kim Krans's Wild Unknown. So again, thanks to Effie Wild, the Art Witch, for, this card, we'll come back to that card, for showing me this deck, for reigniting my wonder and play and wanting to know what these cards were about. There was so little on the cards. I know now that that's a problem for some people because it doesn't mirror the Rider-Waite-Smith in the ways that people like. But I was so intrigued. I just wanted to know more and more and more. And it came with, oops, I'm knocking stuff all over my desk. Came with this really nice guidebook. And, you know, again, it's not too much to be overwhelming. I could have wanted more, but it was a nice size. And it told me what to look at. And then I just would think about the lines and the colors on these cards, even when it didn't always tell me why the picture related to it. Sometimes it did, like the Four of Swords, right? It talks about the lamb sits in stillness without fear, even though those swords are looming. And I mean, I could see that in this picture. Those swords are looming. They look like they're just going to drop down and pierce that wee little lamb. But look how serene she looks. And so these cards just absolutely ignited me. But like with a lot of, and this card, like my family cannot believe that I have anything in my house because I can't eyeball things, sword things, knife things, worm things. Like I cannot tolerate them. My kids will call and tell me what movies, oh mom, there's an eyeball thing, you can't see it. But that's the card of nightmares. So that made perfect sense to me. So, oh look, and we have that little fool. So these cards really were, I don't know if they were deepening or if they were just another milestone, but they got me back into it in 2017. And then life happened and I got away from it again, the tarot specifically, but I'd started looking at cards. I'd started realizing there were other styles, and I found oracle cards, and I have oracle, or I probably have 5 oracle decks for every 1 tarot deck that I have. And in 2022, I discovered the Urban Crow Oracle by M.J. Cullinane. And so even though this isn't a tarot deck, it's going to get an honorable mention in terms of a milestone, because this one, while it has a guidebook with it, has a little guidebook, it's very nice, you know, for a sort of glorified little white book. It was still, it still wasn't as much as I wanted, but I had realized that I had the ability to sort of dig in a little bit more on my own. And so, and I'm a journaler, I teach journaling, I work with artists, that kind of thing. So I just made my own. And so for Lent, you know, not too many people study tarot and oracle cards as their Lenten practice, but that's me. I would pull a card, I would write about the title, I would write about what I see, then I would write about what the guide says, and then I would write about how that impacted me. And I called it my Daily Crow, and I did that every day, all the way through, maybe through. And so I now have my own book, and I've put in other things that were happening, and sort of how it related, and that just really deepened my practice. And I loved that because there wasn't anything, I guess I liked it because it was enough of a system, but outside of the system. And I made myself a little index. And this is the first, I didn't know anything about independent decks versus mass market. I had just found her online. So I have now learned that there are actually more cards, and I've ordered the expansion. So she gets an honorable mention, this little deck, and my own beefier guidebook that's built on my experience. So now I'm in the point where I am not only finding the cards and being attracted to the artwork, but I am layering the meaning in the guidebook with my experience. Like, what does that card mean? How does it come up in the day? What if it comes up another day, right? And I'm making these notes in my own kind of grimoire. And I've been doing that since 2022 with oracle cards. But this fall, November, so the next milestone and really kind of coming into the now. So the first prompt was the beginning. That was my Stairs of Gold. The Deepening was my Mythic workbook and my Mythic tarot and my new Palladini deck. My Milestones were the Thoth deck and the Wild Unknown. And then the now. I got myself in November. I love planners, journals, things like that. And I came across the Ritual Planner. And when you first buy it, it doesn't look anything like this. And while this is not a tarot deck or a book, these books and journals are always they're my gateway. They're my way in. So I bought this, and I know this is really big for some people. This is a letter size, and it's structured so like a planner, but you do, and I got just the one card. You could buy it with a 1 card or a 3 card daily draw. And I thought, oh, how fun is this? I'm already doing that for my oracle cards. And then I started sort of reading, and it had, at the beginning, it has this wonderful section with all of the, my spiritual practice is all about moon phases. I've followed the Sabbats and the Esbats and things, so that I didn't need. But then these tarot spreads, and then these great questions. I have a self-coaching practice about asking questions. And I was like, oh, these are great questions. And then I realized, oh, they're tarot questions. And then there's a whole, cheat sheet laid out. I thought, oh, well, I could get out my tarot cards and I could do that again instead of my oracle cards. And so this page is supposed to be where you do your natal chart. And I didn't know anything about astrology. So I just glued in an extra page and started in December to just kind of practice it. And this is me. My hair never looked like this in the 80s, even though that would have been really cool. But now that I'm in my 50s, my hair looks great like that. And these are my puppies. So I just put some of myself in here. I put some of the decks that I have. I just started doing the year ahead, month ahead spreads. I do have a thing about, again, faces and eyes. So there were a bunch of faces kind of around here that I just covered up with stickers because I love stickers so much. And so this has started my practice. I'll turn to, for every week, I draw a card, I write in what the message is. So I'm still learning. And then I'm writing more about what it's meaning to me. And I have little tip-ins I've been getting new decks. I got 3 new little decks. These are 2 oracles, 2 tarot and 1 oracle. And this is a little, another little Fae oracle. And I am loving working with my Wild Unknown tarot. And because of this, in November, I started watching TarotTube. Didn't know such a thing was out there. And I've just loved seeing everybody's decks, although it's been difficult on my pocketbook because while I found this one through Effie, I had no idea because I don't go to any of those bookstores anymore, and I hadn't thought to look online for other cards. So I have found a couple of more decks that really sing to my heart, and I love the idea of knowing what they mean and having a system. Again, I love the languages, and so I think about the Rider-Waite-Smith as this sort of core language, and all these other different types of decks as dialects of it. And I am really keen on learning the core language. I did just order an actual Rider-Waite-Smith deck, although I think the new Palladini is close enough. And but the ones that are really speaking to me now, I have this Tarot Gallimaufry, which this word If you know this word, it's an archaic word. I had no idea. I love cool words. I'm totally a word nerd. This word means like a mixture, a stew, a mélange, a jumble. And this is by an artist, Lisa McLoughlin. And this is, I found it, somebody posted about it. And this is a collage deck, and there are no people in it. And which is one of the things that I love about the Wild Unknown. It makes me really happy. And this one has so much going on, and reading the guidebook and finding out all about the different botanical references and the nature references, and some of them you have to look really carefully. So I am learning the language of tarot, the traditional meanings, and then also seeing them interpreted. And here's, I'll have to show you my favorite card. This one, I don't think there are any more. I think I got 100. I got number 123 out of 150. But I'm going to show you this card anyway because it's just so beautiful. Look at that, the beacon. Like, that's a gorgeous star card. This was also the first deck that I found that when it got to the court cards, I know now that a lot of people have issues with the court cards, but one of the things that really struck me with Lisa McLaughlin's deck here is that, and this is the first time I'd seen it. I mean, y'all have probably seen it a bunch of other places before, but this was the first time I ran across it, is that it was the seeker, the explorer, the guardian, and the sovereign. And I loved that it took the gender and the gender hierarchy that was integrated into the, page and knight and queen and king and princess and prince and all those other. I had seen other words, but they were always male and female, and the males always seemed to be higher along in the hierarchy, and that just kind of bothered me as a queer middle-aged woman. I struggled with that. So this was the first time I had seen it done differently, and it also actually helped me learn the energy of the court cards, that the page is the seeker, and that the knight is the explorer, the one that's out in the world, and the guardian is that protector. The guardian is a type of sovereign, and then the sovereign overall. It just made sense to me. Anyway, so that's what I love, and that's what I'm practicing with now. Oops. Oh, and I just got an extra. I don't know what the Paprika Blaze is. It was like an extra card that came with the deck. So sometimes I just put it on my altar when I'm cold, and it makes me warmer. I don't know if that's a tarot practice or not. And then last honorable mentions about what I'm doing now. I'm kind of continuing the theme of learning about decks that don't have a lot of people in them. This Tarot Landscapes is, you may have seen a walkthrough of this. It's wonderful. It has landscapes, as the title says. Here, I put it back in order so we could look at it for just a second. But this one, you just get to walk through it. There's just something so invitational for me, as if I'm really the one taking this journey right now. I'm walking through this landscape. This is what I'm seeing. I love this point of view. And it's also a little flat, but colorful. So for me, it's sort of just the right. Oh, if you don't like spiders, don't look up there. This tree. So the Hierophant is a tree or an owl. That just so speaks to me. I could sit and learn and just open up with all humility and wonder to a giant tree. So, and the Lovers, this little bend, where are they? The Chariot. I feel like I'm in the chariot racing along, flying after this falcon here. And the Strength, I kind of had to think about this one, this Strength card, because I really do like that lion and that gentle internal strength, but I really like the strength of nature here, kind of encroaching, not being held off by this urban setting, that even with all these huge skyscrapers, there is strength in the little bird, the little brambles, these berries that have the courage and the strength to get the sunlight and still grow. And the Hermit, look at this. The light is more out in nature than like in the lantern, but it's still shining and looking out over the land. And the Wheel of Fortune, that's pretty cosmic. Anyway, I won't go through all of it because I'm sure there are other channels that have a lovely walkthrough, but my practice right now really is using decks that that are invitational and are not very people-y, not a lot of human faces looking back at me, but I do plan to continue to study, and I will work with the Rider-Waite-Smith. I think being kind of coming in a circuit the way I did, starting with some pretty traditional, decks, and then getting knocked off course, circling around, finding a way to come back into it with these independent art, kind of expanding the language, has really given me appreciation and made me want to come back to the basics. So, oh, I forgot to mention, I did actually at one point I found it in a bookstore. It was a little paperback by Eve Gray, Ellen Gray maybe, I can't quite remember. And it was about the tarot, but y'all, it smelled like cat pee and smoke. So it was just a little paperback. So I sort of felt like, I'm just cursed. I'm never going to learn this. So I'm so grateful for beautiful guidebooks that smell delicious and have all these beautiful, enriching colors. I am so grateful for this ritual planner that lets me write and journal and explore and learn and get everything in my brain. And I'm really grateful for the conversation around tarot and the different perspectives that I've found on TarotTube. I love the story. I love the art. And thank you, Simon, particularly because you're the one that I discovered and felt like you were saying you really did want to see what other people's journeys look like. So here's my answer. And I hope to meet more of you now that I've joined the conversation. I probably won't shut up for a while. So, all right. Thanks, my new friends. Take care.